At GM Motors Company, we are committed to building innovative, reliable, and inspiring vehicles that move the world forward.
General Motors built many classic cars through the 1900s, but only a few carry true muscle under the hood. These are the 12 most powerful GM muscle cars ever produced, each built to rule the road. Imagine a time when cars weren't just about getting from one place to another, they were about power, pride, and proving you ruled the streets. GM wasn't just making cars back then, they were creating legends. Today we're taking a ride through the 12 greatest GM muscle cars ever built. Machines that didn't just move, they roared. Which of these cars would you choose if you had the chance to drive just one for a day? Subscribe now, otherwise this video and channel might never appear to you again. Number 12. 1962 Pontiac Catalina Super Duty. 1962 was a year Pontiac decided to make some noise. Literally. The Catalina Super Duty wasn't a car that sat quietly in a showroom waiting to be admired. It was a street fighter, a machine built to turn heads and drop jaws the moment its engine growled. Under its hood lived a beast, the legendary 421 cubic inch Super Duty V8. Pontiac claimed it had 405 horsepower, but anyone who really knew cars whispered that the real number was closer to 460. It was like Pontiac was letting you in on a secret, one that would make you grin every time you pressed the pedal. But raw power wasn't enough. Pontiac made sure this big car could dance. They swapped heavy parts for aluminum panels and a lighter hood, trimming about 150 pounds. Suddenly, this full-sized cruiser was light on its feet. Imagine a heavyweight boxer who moves like a dancer. That was the Catalina Super Duty. And when you hit the gas, it launched from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 5.4 seconds, an incredible feat for the early 60s. Inside, there were no fancy extras or distractions, just bucket seats and the essentials for racing. This car was built with one goal: speed. Twin Carter carburetors, an aluminum intake, and a performance-tuned suspension made sure every ride felt like you were holding onto a rocket with a steering wheel. For racers, Pontiac even made the exhaust easy to swap, practically encouraging them to set new records on the strip. It wasn't just a car, it was Pontiac's way of saying, "We're here, and we mean business." Number 11. 1987 Buick Regal GNX. By the late 1980s, many believed the golden era of muscle cars was over. Gas prices were high, emission rules were strict, and most cars coming off the assembly line felt tame compared to the beasts of the 60s and 70s. But then Buick did something no one expected. They unleashed the 1987 Buick Regal GNX, a car that reminded everyone that muscle was far from dead. At first glance, the GNX didn't scream for attention. It came only in black, like a shadow ready to strike. But under the hood was no ordinary V8. In fact, it wasn't a V8 at all. Buick dared to break tradition with a 3.8-liter turbocharged V6. This wasn't just technology for show. It packed a serious punch. 300 horsepower and 380 pound-feet of torque turned this car into a silent assassin. Step on the gas, and it leapt forward like it had been waiting all day for this moment. The numbers were jaw-dropping. 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 4.7 seconds, faster than many Ferraris and Corvettes of its time. The top speed, 124 miles per hour, leaving competitors staring at its taillights. But speed wasn't the only surprise. Buick gave it a unique rear differential and torque arm suspension, letting the GNX grip the road like glue. Drivers often said it felt like the car was reading their mind around corners. What made the GNX even more special was its rarity. Buick only built 547 of these machines, making them collector's treasures today. Driving one feels like being part of an exclusive club, the kind where your membership card is a set of black keys. Inside, the cockpit was simple but purposeful. The dash had a turbo boost gauge, reminding you with every glance that you weren't just driving, you were commanding a force of nature. And when you parked, the car seemed to sit there with a quiet confidence, as if it knew it could outrun anything nearby. This wasn't just a car, it was Buick's bold statement: muscle isn't dead, it just learned new tricks. Number 10. 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle LS6. The year was 1970, and Chevrolet was ready to make a statement, a loud one. Enter the Chevelle LS6, a car that didn't just participate in the muscle car wars, it wanted to end them. This machine had presence. Its muscular stance and bold lines turned heads before the engine even started. And under that iconic cowl induction hood sat a monster, the 454 cubic inch LS6 V8. This beast pumped out 450 horsepower and a ground-shaking 500 pound-feet of torque. Press the pedal, and you weren't just driving, you were unleashing thunder. The LS6 was built for performance from every angle. It could launch from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 5.8 seconds. An incredible feat for a full-sized car in 1970. And the quarter mile? It could tear through it in under 14 seconds, leaving behind a trail of smoke and stunned onlookers. Sure, it guzzled fuel at just 9 miles per gallon, but no one cared. Back then, speed mattered more than saving gas. Chevrolet didn't just give it power, they gave it style. The 1970 Chevelle had a wider, meaner look than its predecessors. The sculpted body lines, rectangular parking lamps, and aggressive front end made it look fast even when parked. Pop the hood, and you'd find an 800 CFM Holley 4-barrel carburetor, feeding that big block V8. Inside the engine bay, forged pistons and a forged steel crank made sure it could handle everything you threw at it. Step inside, and you'd find a mix of comfort and muscle. The updated dash and bucket seats reminded you this was a car made for both the street and the strip. But the moment you pressed the throttle, all comfort was forgotten. The LS6 was a monster, roaring to life and reminding everyone around that this car was here to dominate. The 1970 Chevelle S6 wasn't just one of the most powerful GM muscle cars, it was a legend, a machine that embodied the very spirit of the muscle car era. Number 9, 1970 Plymouth Cuda 440+6. 1970 was a wild year for muscle cars, and Plymouth made sure nobody could ignore the Cuda 440+6. This car didn't just roll onto the scene, it stormed in wearing bright, head-turning colors like plum-crazy purple, daring anyone to look away. But the real magic happened under the hood. The heart of the Cuda was a 440 cubic inch V8 paired with a 6-pack carburetor setup, delivering a ferocious 390 horsepower that could make the ground shake. Every gear shift felt like a launch sequence. Drivers gripped the iconic Hurst pistol grip shifter and felt like they were commanding a rocket. Plymouth gave enthusiasts options too. From the 383 to the mighty 426 hit the sweet spot between everyday drivability and raw muscle. Its 106-inch wheelbase and relatively light 3,100-pound weight made it surprisingly agile, not just a straight-line bruiser. And it wasn't just power that made this car legendary. It was rare. Out of nearly 49,000 Barracudas built in 1970, only 548 were convertibles. Spotting one today is like seeing a shooting star. Decades later, some of these cars were lovingly restored, getting fresh paint, rebuilt carburetors, and upgrades to bring them back to life. Seeing one on the road feels like watching history roar past you. Inside, the Cuda was just as exciting. Black vinyl bucket seats, a wood-rim steering wheel, and that pistol grip shifter made the cockpit feel like a race car. It was the kind of car that made you smile before you even turned the key, because you knew what was about to happen next. The 1970 Cuda 440+6 wasn't just a muscle car, it was a statement. Loud, proud, and unforgettable. It captured the rebellious spirit of the entire muscle car era. Number 8, 1969 Chevy COPO Camaro. 1969 was the year Chevrolet decided to bend the rules and create a car that would shock the competition. The COPO Camaro. This wasn't your average Camaro you'd find sitting in a dealership lot. Thanks to a little-known backdoor option called the Central Office Production Order COPO, Chevy dealers could sneak a massive 427 cubic inch big block V8 into a lighter, more agile Camaro body. It was like putting the heart of a heavyweight boxer into the body of a sprinter. On paper, the engine was rated at 425 horsepower, but most drivers swore it felt even stronger. This was the same powerhouse found in top-tier Corvettes, but now in a car that weighed less and moved faster. Every time you hit the gas, it felt like the tires were crying for mercy, and you couldn't help but grin. The COPO Camaro came in two versions. The 9561 featured the L72 Iron Block 427, and about 1,000 of those were built, making them favorites among racers. But the real unicorn was the COPO 9560, which housed the legendary ZL1 aluminum 427. Only 69 were ever built, making it one of the rarest Camaros in existence. Spotting one today is like finding buried treasure. Chevrolet didn't stop there. They offered clever features like the V75 liquid tire chain option, which literally sprayed traction compound onto the rear tires to help with grip, perfect for drag racing. It was pure muscle car mischief straight from the factory. The 1969 COPO Camaro wasn't just fast, it was a rebel. A car that dared to push boundaries and rewrite what a Camaro could be. It remains one of the most iconic and desirable muscle cars of all time, proving that sometimes breaking the rules creates legends. Number 7. 1969 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am. 1969 was a special year for Pontiac. While the GTO had been their poster child for years, Pontiac wanted to give the Firebird its own chance to shine, and that's how the very first Firebird Trans Am was born. This wasn't just a car, it was a declaration that the Firebird was ready to stand tall among muscle car legends. Every Trans Am came dressed in striking polar white paint with bold blue racing stripes running the length of its body. A rear spoiler perched proudly on the trunk lid, while functional hood scoops made it look like it was ready to breathe fire at any moment. The car didn't just look fast, it looked alive. Under the hood, Pontiac offered two versions of the Ram Air 400 V8. The Ram Air 3 delivered 335 horsepower, while the Ram Air 4 added an even hotter cam and tuning, bumping output to 345 horsepower. This meant the Firebird Trans Am had plenty of muscle to back up its aggressive looks. Launching it hard from a stoplight could quite literally give your neck a workout. Pontiac didn't forget about handling either. The Trans Am came with a heavy-duty suspension that let it carve through corners with precision, something many muscle cars of the time struggled with. Test drivers praised it for feeling just as confident on a mountain road as it did at the drag strip, and while only 697 coupes and a mere 8 convertibles were built that year, the rarity only added to its charm. Back then, Pontiac barely advertised it, letting it quietly slip into showrooms, but for those who found one, it felt like discovering a hidden gem. The 1969 Firebird Trans Am marked the beginning of a legacy that would eventually outshine even the mighty GTO. It was the first step in turning the Firebird into Pontiac's ultimate performance icon. Number 6. 1970 Oldsmobile 442 W30. By 1970, the muscle car wars were in full swing, and Oldsmobile wasn't about to sit on the sidelines. They rolled out the 442 W30, a car that proved you could have brutal power, sharp handling, and even a touch of comfort, all in one package. This was Oldsmobile's way of saying, we can flex our muscles too. At its heart was a massive 455 cubic inch V8 engine. Even in its base form, it was a powerhouse. But the W30 package cranked it up with a hotter cam, special cylinder heads, and a 4-barrel carburetor. Officially rated at 370 horsepower and a monstrous 500 pound of torque, this car could launch with enough force to leave your stomach at the stoplight. Oldsmobile went the extra mile to make the W30 lighter and quicker. They used aluminum parts for the intake manifold and rear differential, and the fiberglass hood came with functional air scoops to help the engine breathe. Every pound saved meant quicker acceleration, and this car was all about getting off the line fast. But the W30 wasn't just a straight-line brute. It came with a heavy-duty suspension, front disc brakes, and sway bars that gave it confidence through the corners. Whether you chose the Hurst-shifted 4-speed manual or the performance-tuned automatic, the 442 felt planted and eager to run. Inside, it reminded you that Oldsmobile still cared about comfort. Bucket seats, a full console, and even air conditioning could be ordered, a rarity in many muscle cars. Some even came with 8-track players, so you could blast your favorite tunes while blasting down the quarter mile. The 1970 Oldsmobile 442 W30 was the perfect blend of brains and brawn. It wasn't just a muscle car, it was a well-rounded performance machine that showed Oldsmobile could hang with the best of them and sometimes even beat them. Number 5. 1996 Chevrolet Impala SS. The mid-1990s were not exactly a golden age for muscle cars. Most automakers had moved towards smaller, fuel-efficient sedans, and the spirit of raw performance felt like it was fading. Then Chevrolet shocked everyone by reviving a legend, the Impala SS. And this time, it wasn't just a comfy cruiser. It was a full-sized 4-door with the soul of a muscle car. Under the hood sat the LT1 5.7-liter V8, the very same engine found in the Corvette of the era. It produced 260 horsepower and 330 pound of torque, turning this big sedan into a straight-line menace. Plant your foot on the gas, and this nearly 2-ton car surged forward, hitting 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 7 seconds, quick enough to surprise anyone who underestimated it. What really set the '96 Impala SS apart was its attitude. It came in menacing colors like black, dark cherry, and green-gray metallic. It sat lower than a normal Caprice, with a sport-tuned suspension and big 17-inch 5-spoke wheels that made it look ready for trouble. The subtle Impala logo on the rear quarter panel wasn't just a badge, it was a warning. Step inside and you'd find leather bucket seats, a floor-mounted shifter, and a driver-focused dash. It was comfortable and roomy, but still felt like a car built for someone who loved driving. It was the kind of machine that made even a daily commute feel like an event. The 1996 Impala SS was proof that the muscle car spirit wasn't dead. It had just put on a suit and grown up. It delivered power, presence, and practicality, all in one package, making it one of the most beloved modern classics in the GM lineup. Number 4. 1973 Chevrolet Chevelle Laguna 454 SS. 1973 marked a big shift for muscle cars. New government safety rules meant cars had to get heavier, and rising insurance rates made high-horsepower machines harder to sell. But Chevrolet wasn't ready to give up just yet. They built the Chevelle Laguna 454 SS, a car that proved muscle could still thrive even in changing times. At the heart of the Laguna SS was the mighty LS4 454 cubic-inch V8, rated at 245 net horsepower. After the switch to stricter SAE ratings, it still packed a wallop thanks to its huge torque curve. Mash the pedal, and this car moved with authority, putting its power down through either a 4-speed manual or a 3-speed turbo hydromatic transmission. What made the Laguna stand out was its new aerodynamic design. The rounded front end, sloped grille, and body-colored urethane nose gave it a sleeker, more modern look, a shape that would later inspire NASCAR racers. In fact, the Laguna became a favorite among stock car teams because its body design cut through the air better than most competitors. Inside, you got comfort along with performance. Bucket seats, a center console, and a sporty dash layout made it feel like a car you could live with every day. But when you needed to remind someone what a big block Chevy could do, the Laguna SS was more than happy to deliver. The 1973 Laguna 454 SS proved that muscle cars could evolve without losing their spirit. It might not have been the most powerful Chevelle ever, but it carried the torch proudly during a tough time for performance cars, and today, it's a rare and underappreciated piece of GM muscle history. Number 3. 1965 Pontiac GTO Tri-Power. If there was one car that lit the fuse on the muscle car explosion of the 1960s, it was the 1965 Pontiac GTO. This was the car that turned an ordinary mid-sized Tempest into a street legend, and the Tri-Power setup made it unforgettable. Under the hood sat a 389 cubic-inch V8 paired with 3 two-barrel carburetors, hence the name Tri-Power. Together, they produced a ferocious 360 horsepower that made the GTO one of the quickest cars on the street. The moment you buried your foot in the throttle, all 3 carbs opened up, and the car lunged forward with a sound that sent chills down your spine. Pontiac gave the GTO more than just raw power. It looked every bit as mean as it was. Hood scoops, stacked headlights, and clean, aggressive lines made it look fast even when parked. Enthusiasts loved that they could get it with a 4-speed manual transmission and a limited-slip rear end, which turned every stoplight into an invitation to race. Inside, the GTO offered a driver-focused cockpit with bucket seats, a wood-rim steering wheel, and optional rally gauges. It felt like a car built for someone who lived to drive, because that's exactly what it was. The 1965 GTO wasn't just a muscle car. It was the muscle car that inspired an entire generation. It proved that power, style, and accessibility could come together in one package and change the industry forever. Number 2. 1966 Chevrolet Chevelle SS 396. 1966 was the year the Chevelle SS became a full-fledged muscle car. Not just a trim package, but a performance machine that could take on anyone. The SS 396 was Chevrolet's answer to the growing muscle car craze, and it quickly became a favorite on the streets and at the drag strip. Under the hood sat the big block 396 cubic-inch V8, available in 3 power levels, 325, 360, or 375 horsepower. The top-spec version turned the Chevelle into a rocket, with a solid lifter camshaft and Holley 4-barrel carburetor that made every throttle press feel like you were uncaging a beast. But the 66 SS 396 wasn't just about brute force, it looked the part too. The bulging power dome hood, blacked-out grille, and SS badging gave it a menacing presence. Wide-track tires and optional mag-style wheels completed the picture, making this Chevelle look like it was built to win fights at the stoplight. Chevelle also gave it a heavy-duty suspension and optional Muncie 4-speed manual gearbox that let drivers row through the gears and stay glued to the pavement. Even inside, You could spec bucket seats, a center console, and a gauge cluster that made the cockpit feel like a proper driver's car. The 1966 Chevelle SS 396 wasn't just a muscle car, it was Chevrolet throwing its hat into the ring and telling the competition, "We're here to play." Today, it stands as one of the most beloved and collectible muscle cars of the 1960s. Number 1, 1969 Chevrolet Camaro ZL1. When it comes to GM muscle cars, nothing sits higher on the throne than the 1969 Camaro ZL1. This wasn't just a car, it was a legend born out of a loophole. Thanks to Chevrolet's COPO, Central Office Production Order program, a handful of dealers were able to sneak something outrageous into the Camaro lineup, the all-aluminum ZL1 427 Big Block V8. This engine was a masterpiece, originally developed for Can-Am racing. It weighed about 100 pounds less than a typical iron block 427, which made the Camaro lighter, quicker, and meaner. Officially rated at 430 horsepower, real-world dyno numbers suggested it was closer to 500, an absolute monster for its time. On the drag strip, the ZL1 was unstoppable. With slicks and the right driver, it could run quarter miles in the low 11-second range, supercar territory, even by today's standards. It was the kind of car that made other muscle cars nervous just by showing up. But power wasn't the only thing that made the ZL1 special. It was rare. Only 69 were ever built, making it one of the most sought-after collector cars in history. Spotting one today is like seeing a unicorn, and if you're lucky enough to hear one start up, the roar of that ZL1 engine will send chills down your spine. The 1969 Camaro ZL1 wasn't just the peak of GM muscle, it was the definition of it. A car so powerful, so rare, and so feared that it became the ultimate street legend. We've just taken a ride through GM's most legendary muscle cars, from the brute strength of the 1962 Pontiac Catalina Super Duty to the rare and fearsome 1969 Camaro ZL1. These machines weren't just cars, they were rolling statements, each one screaming power, pride, and performance. Every one of these legends tells a story about a time when Detroit was building cars with heart, soul, and a little bit of rebellion. And even today, decades later, they still capture our imagination and make our hearts race. If this journey through GM's greatest muscle cars made your heart beat a little faster, don't let it end here. Subscribe right now because we have more stories, more legends, and more pure muscle car history coming your way. Subscribe now, otherwise this video and channel might never appear to you again. And tell us in the comments, which one of these muscle cars would you pick if you could drive it for just one day?